Guru Nation, I'm about to go live with my girl Maria Milas from Catalyst, Clinical Research Catalyst Summit, and she's introducing me right now, so I'm backstage, but she put on a really cool event, so I thought I might record some of it. And you see me in my messy office here. I took a day off of work, but I'm on this because I see she's serious about this. And I wanted to help her out anything I can do. And the community and research is really growing, especially when it comes to private research. I just talked to a site in Belgrade, Serbia about this. And if they can kind of emulate what the small community-based sites are doing here in the United States, that'd be a big leap for research, because Europe, as you guys know, is super diverse and super important as far as global economy is concerned. So I'm going to be getting on this. I don't want anything out of it. I do these things when I see the people on the other end whose event it is, like in this case Maria Milas, are serious about it. But I am wearing my EMA Clinical Trust shirt because there might be a sponsor out there in the audience, and I'll try to get a study. I'm going to try to pitch my sites somewhere in the middle. So just be a fly on the wall and you can listen in on this. Here is the event. Shout out to Tiffany Ashton, too, fellow Save Our Sites panelist and advocate. Yeah, shout out to the fellow Romanians out there. A little known fact about me, because I'm involved. I'm one of the co-founders of Latinos in Clinical Research. By the way, shout out to everyone from Spain in this event. This amazing place. I'm really excited about Europe, considering my European roots and the fact that Europe is being research is becoming more privatized there, which is very exciting for me to hear. And I've got a lot of stories I could tell you just from today alone. Forget about any other time. Just today alone, I have enough stories for this hour. The journey's been amazing. By the way, this book is getting translated into Serbian today, thanks to a private site, the first and only so far private site in Serbia. This is why, like, the trend is already happening, the movement's happening. But my journey is, I was a college kid, pre-med. Like I said, both of my parents were foreign trained physicians, but when they immigrated to the United States, they had different jobs, physical therapy, weight loss centers. Eventually, my dad did become a doctor in the U.S. I was almost graduating high school when he got his U.S. equivalency and started practicing as a physician. So right when I left to university, my dad actually became a psychiatrist. By the time I came back, in only 4 short years, he partnered with a bunch of doctors and they started a site. And one of the reasons they started a site, and this is actually what's happening in Europe right now, they were working at a University of Southern California, an academic medical center. And a few of the doctors were kind of frustrated how long everything was taking to get done. So they decided to partner and create like a private site just a few cities away from Los Angeles, which was a city called Anaheim in California. That's where I was basically raised my entire life. And they were able to get many more studies than they did at USC. By the time I graduated, I wanted to intern there to look good for medical school. So I didn't have any expectation of what research was. My dad didn't really even know. He was a minor player in that site. He wasn't even like a major physician with them. But it turns out they were using his private practice to do the clinic. So I interned there because I thought it would help my medical school prospects. And then things got crazy because a few months in, I remember all the coordinators like left. They just walked out. And I was like, oh, what's going on? You know, I was just buying dry ice for the site and doing like anything I can do to help. They were like, yeah, we didn't get paid in a while and I don't know what's going on. Well, it turns out the ownership group completely mismanaged it and basically left my dad at his private practice with like a bunch of studies that were incomplete, errors. Like, I mean, they just ignored protocols. So he told me, hey, I'm either going to shut it down. That means you're going to have to either get into med school soon or find a real job, or you can take over, but you're going to have to commit, put money into it. Like, so I chose that latter because my grades were not that great. And I was kept getting rejected from med schools, like every medical school, rejection, rejection, rejection. And so I really had no other option. And I was 23 at the time, and so I had to learn quickly. Like, I learned how to run a site basically in that year. Like, it was just me, my dad, another doctor, and that's it. And you guys know investigators are not that involved, like at those kind of sites. So it was basically me running the show until I started hiring some people in year 2, year 3. But that planted the seed for me. Like, I remember I would go on Google and search for things. I cannot find anything. Like, I didn't know the first thing about my job. And I was too embarrassed to ask the monitors because I was afraid, they would find out that I don't know what I'm doing and I would lose the studies. And at this point, I'm depending on that site. It's like the only thing I have. So I had to learn the hard way. And then that planted the seed. Why can't I find any information? The only information I found was from this company called Center Watch, and everything was behind a paywall. Like, you have to pay for everything. I thought, okay, well, once I figure this out, maybe I'll start like a blog, because there was no YouTube back then. Remember, this was like 2006. YouTube existed, but it was like for funny cat videos. It wasn't like serious like it is now. I mean, people were posting like just stupid things. It was like to waste time. But by the time I figure everything out 3 years later, YouTube got mature. So I was like, why don't I just post stuff on initially I thought it was to get patients, but it turned out the only people watching were other sites or career-minded people, like asking me questions. No patients were asking me anything. Like, my intention was, let me educate patients. Hopefully some of them join my trials, and the ones that are not local, I could refer them to other sites and create a business out of recruitment. That didn't happen. Everyone asking questions were people like Janice or Valeria in the comments. How do I do this, or how do I... So I switched the content to research professionals. And that's it. Haven't looked back since. Right now I'm in Yuma, Arizona, an underserved location in the desert southwest. 30 minutes from the Mexican border, 5 minutes from the California border. I mean, we're like really in no man's land, more or less. And it's still a big enough city. It's 150,000 people, very diverse. And the sponsors liked the fact that we have the patient population. And I created the site here after learning all my mistakes from the past sites. So far, I mean, I think this is like the best site I've created when it's all said and done, God willing. But it's also the environment was appropriate for making it easy to get studies because I'm not in a competitive area, and it's right around the whole initiative for diversity, and it doesn't hurt that I'm in a very diverse place. Like, they want Hispanics in their study, you gotta go to where the Hispanic people live. You don't go to Boston or Harvard. I mean, who needs another site in those places? But you need sites in real communities where there are no really research options. There's a lot of doctors, but not research options. So anyways, long story short, I think that's happening in Europe too. Like, let's be real. I was not Mother Teresa when I made the videos. I wanted to make videos to attract patients to my site. It was only when I saw the demand was not there that I thought, okay, well, either I ignore what the market's telling me, or I adapt and make content for them and not worry really about the business. But the business eventually took care of itself. Like, with the YouTube comes a lot of opportunities that come your way. So, and quite honestly, anyone can do this. I mean, how many of these, channels exist in other countries in the native language? Like, none really. I mean, there's a few, I'm sure, but not really. Anyone can do it. It's still wide open for anyone watching. What I'm seeing now in Europe with privatization of research is basically what happened in the US in the early 2000s. Like, it's the same story. I just talked to a site in Belgrade, like I said, Serbia. And it was founded by a very similar story to how my dad and his doctor business partners from 20 years ago started. They get fed up with bureaucracy. They had some issues with the government until some regulatory laws passed that made it easier to start private sites, and guess what? Sponsors love them. Like, so it's the same. We don't have to reinvent the roadmap. Every country has its own regulatory process, but the big picture is still there, and it's smaller organizations sometimes can affect more change faster than the large ones. And we're in a new economy. We're in a new world where everyone is kind of has the power at their fingertips now with AI, with like, look what you're doing, Maria. You're combining all these people, in one place. I think 800 people registered from all over the world. Like, that was not possible 20 years ago, but it's possible now. It's not only possible now, it's normal now. Like, we just get used to it. Yeah, so a private clinic is basically a private practice so a doctor's private practice that you embed the research within. So oftentimes the challenge becomes the space. You run out of space because a lot of these private practices, and public ones too, they go by revenue per square foot. Like, how much can they generate per square foot of space? And so research is great because it's very scalable and it's not linear as far as the revenue that you bring in. Like, it's after a while it grows exponentially, and you can build a scalable business model. So you find a doctor that treats patients and embed your research within their clinic. And your research sounds fancy, but when I started here in Yuma, it was just me. Like, me and a nurse practitioner. That was the research. I think our first piece of equipment was a safe. We bought a safe for drug, and we installed it together, like with a screwdriver and like by ourselves. And we begged the doctor, do you have space? Any space you're not using, put us there. So we had a little corner in a room. Great. That's going to be our research site within the site, and we could leverage the fact that their practice is huge. So when a sponsor came to visit, we toured the whole facility and all the exam rooms. The sponsor doesn't know that we're only using like a small corner. They just think the whole thing. So eventually you outgrow that, because once I had 3 people in this one small space when I hired coordinators, but eventually you need your own space. And so we ended up renting a space nearby, very adjacent to the doctor's office. And we use both. So we have what's called a hub and spoke model. So the hub is our bigger space we rented, and the spokes are the individual clinics. So just like a wheel has like a hub and spokes. So our hub is the center. Like, now it's our big office that we have. And thus each spoke is a clinic that we partner with. So our initial PI introduced us to, over the last 2 years, 4 of his colleagues that are different specialists. If anyone watching wants to give me a study, we have a dermatologist, we have a pulmonologist, we have a sleep specialist, a psychiatrist, a dermatologist, and an internal medicine, and a cardiologist. All those are spokes from the hub. And basically the same situation is at each of those clinics, what it was at my first one. Not that much space, but you're welcome to use the exam rooms when they're not busy. And we learned each doctor's schedule. Like, on Mondays, this cardiologist, all the rooms are busy, so we can't see any patient here. We have to see them at our hub. But on Tuesdays, we can use these rooms. And then you just learn every doctor's schedule and which rooms are available. And then you figure out how to schedule patients based on their workflow. And you could leverage, they don't charge me rent. They never charge me rent. I only paid rent voluntarily when I felt guilty that we were actually making money and I was paying the PI, but we were using his space. So I was like, let me pay you guys like at least $1,000 a month. And then once we could afford our own space, we just moved to our own space. So now we're back to no rent at the spokes, but rent at the hub. And we've expanded that hub. Every time a tenant leaves that building, we take that space too. So we started with one office, and now we have like 5 of them there. We have a drug room. I recently did a site tour on YouTube for that hub, but it's not that difficult, but it's foreign to many people because they're used to seeing academic medical centers. Like, how can I compete with like Harvard? Well, you can't. You're not going to buy this 20,000 square foot building with 30 stories. Like you're not going to do that. But you don't need that to do research. You need literally a corner of a room, and you're leveraging the doctor's practice and expertise. And there's plenty of those kind of people in Europe. And even if they're not in private practice, there's many of them working for hospitals that wouldn't mind if you rented your own space, that they come and do the research and then go back to their day job. And that's kind of what it was today when I met these doctor and his coordinators from Serbia. It's inspiring. And I think that could be done anywhere. I know it's being done in Spain. I know it's being done in Germany. But now it's really happening everywhere, which is amazing opportunity. Yeah, a PI and a coordinator. Unless the PI is very ambitious and wants to be the coordinator, which is very, very rare. Like, that's your better chance, like seeing a UFO land behind you right now where you are. So a PI and a coordinator, and access to patients. And we're making things like Patient ACE, which is recruitment. I know there's like stricter laws in Europe around patient recruitment, online advertising, but in the US, they're getting strict here too. But we have this app that sites can use to like manage their Facebook and Instagram ads and get patients that way. But you can get creative basically. But bottom line is that's the minimum. A PI and a coordinator, and that's it. Then go get a study. And then the sponsor is going to ask, well, why should we give you a study? And you better have a good answer. And if you're going to do this business, you need to focus only on this and nothing else. Like, and I think in Europe it works this way too, but any doctor that has a practice, drug reps come, sales reps. They come from Boehringer Ingelheim, they come from AstraZeneca, they come from Eli Lilly, and they talk about their new drugs, blah, blah, blah. Brainwash them. You go in there, hey, we do research. They're not going to care. They're a sales rep. But you tell them, listen, who's your medical science liaison? I really want to introduce them with... Now you're talking their language, because now that's their boss, basically. And their boss basically measures them on how productive they are in doing things like this. So if they email their MSL, their incentives are, my boss sees that I'm actually in the community talking. Charlie Munger said it best, you don't appeal to people's reason, you appeal to their incentives. So they have every incentive to tell their boss, hey, this guy wants to meet you, and then they'll call you, or they'll set up a Zoom, or they'll come in person. They'll tour your site. They love that. They want more of that. In addition, you go find CROs in your market. Like in the guy's case in Serbia, there was CROs, Serbian CROs. So he went to them. They were like, wow, you can do your study startup in like 1 month instead of 6 months. Okay, I'm interested. So yeah, so you use your strengths to your advantage. Don't pretend like you are University of Belgrade when you're not. But they don't want you to be. That's the thing. So if you want to start a site, I don't care what you've done in the past. You are a salesperson now, period. And by the way, you're a salesperson even if you're not starting a site, you just maybe don't realize it. We run into complications where the physician does not own their own practice but works for a hospital. Then you have to look at an individual level. Does the hospital allow the physician to refer them to studies? If it's their own study, those are ethical considerations and business considerations to factor in. But for the most part, it's either getting them from the PI or their colleagues, and or community outreach. Like this is where research is a very local activity. Like we tend in the industry to talk about these concepts, from a blimp perspective, like a bird's eye view. And it's easy to look at a global map and say we have, a footprint in Germany and a footprint in Arizona. But what happens in those places? Like there's people like me and you that are, and my coordinators who are really the hard workers, like out in the community. Like Lana is at the local soup kitchen, like volunteering. Sometimes we do community outreach events where we cater food for the community. We go to like musical fairs where they're doing like local things. We do YouTube for Yuma, where we interview business owners. We partner with, we do lunch and learn. We become the sales reps for our studies. Everything. You do everything you can and more, because it's never going to be enough. These studies are very complex, and they're looking for sometimes patients that don't even exist in any community. But you do your best. Advertising. I mean, anything you can think of. We're releasing a white paper with Latinos in clinical research, hopefully in the next month, on exactly this, like how to do grassroots community outreach. Anyone can follow this. Who knows their community better than you? Like, nobody. How is Boehringer Ingelheim gonna know what works in Yuma, Arizona, if they barely know where it is? But and your staff know, because you're part of the community. And then it really compounds when you start hiring from the community. Like, oh, well, we will train you on research. And now you're a community member that works at the community site. Now you have connections, and it just compounds this way. I hate when sites in underserved areas hire people from outside the community, because there's no one experienced in their community. I think you need to take it upon yourself to find people and train them, rather than flying in people and paying them 3 times more to come in. I think there's a lot of value hiring and retaining staff from the community itself.